All right, let's go ahead and call this City Council Budget Work Session to order. If we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Doing a roll call, we have all members present. Is there any public comment this evening? Hearing no public comment, we'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
I have a motion to adopt the agenda from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Merrill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. Moving on to F1, we'll be discussing the 2025 budget schedule, the tax levy / tax rate, the general fund operating budget 101, EDA fund operating budget 108, water fund operating budget 601, sewer fund operating budget 602, stormwater fund operating budget 603, liquor fund operating budget 609, and debt service funds summary 931 and 932.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So before we jump into those items, we'll run through the memo here that you have before you. This is stuff that applies throughout the operating budget, right? So when we talk about assumptions for health insurance, workers' comp, all those kinds of things. At this point, you know, those are not things that we know with any definitive certainty, but we make some basic assumptions, and hopefully if we're wrong, hopefully we have estimated too high and we get to revise downward is the intent. So in this, we've already got wage step increases. You know, the union contract's a 3.5% increase, negotiated 3 years ago. Health insurance right now, I'm a little more optimistic than I've been in the past. In the past, I've presented, 20, 25% increases. I think that 15 is reasonable this year. Workers' comp rates, on this one, I actually have us going down. Again, that's kind of a well-informed guess, let's call that. Property insurance, I think we've been pretty steady on property casualty insurance. I think that's going to continue if we're not, in that 3% range. I think we're not going to see 25% increase on that. So, dental insurance, I've got plus 10%, but as is a lot of years, there's a real good chance that ends up just being 0. That's a pretty common occurrence there. The life, accidental death, and dismemberment insurance, same deal. Very common for that to be 0. And if it is not 0, that is not going to break the bank. That will not keep me up at night. Bear in mind also, this operating budget as it is presented does not have a contribution to fund balance, right? Fund balance being our rainy day fund, right? Save money in the good times, so you've got something in the bad times. This also represents taxable market value has only gone up 3.45%. There are some homes, not just in Isani, but also in Wright County where I live, that went down in value, a fair amount in value. So we have a net increase. I think a fair amount of that is we've got some commercial stuff that's coming on and some new homes that are coming on, and help to kind of offset some of the decrease in the existing residential stock. Based on how this is set currently, seeing a roughly 2.6% increase in the tax rate. Okay, and so keep those assumptions and notes in mind. Also, I include the mayor in on this, recognizing how much we have on Cal, recognizing going through 2 rate studies. I am going to try to curtail myself. I periodically get a little on the go, and next thing you know, I'm talking for 2 hours. We do need to actually at least touch on some of this other stuff. So
I was okay with it, but I don't know if Councilman Lundin will be all right with that.
So just remember, this is not the budget we will adopt. There's 0% chance that this is the budget we will adopt.
This
It
is,
ain't-
this
that's
is the
not gonna happen.
kickoff to discussions,
right.
and you can guarantee, what
Correct.
we can guarantee, I mean, last year we cut the tax rate 15.31%, we lowered the levy over $150,000, and we spent, I think, $147,742 more on the PD budget last year even, so we'll, we did all that with spending that extra money, and I think this is the kickoff to the budget season, I think is what Mike is trying to say, so,
Yes, and we're-
so,
Yes, we'll gain more clarity over the next
Yeah.
few months, and even when we get to September and set that preliminary levy, remember, all that is a cap.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't go above it. You can go below as much as you do or do not want, but you can't go above.
You meant by spending time, we were able to do all that, not money, right? You said spending money.
spending
Spend
time
yeah, yeah.
looking at it,
It's
yes.
important, yep.
Yep, doing all those things led to that, and we will continue to do that. But yeah, no, this is just the beginning of the discussion, so.
All right, so real quickly, here we are, July 16th. Basically, this is operating budgets, right? Kind of that first crack. Next meeting will be capital budgets. Again, that's a first crack. If we want to have a third meeting, that part is already set. As long as council at the end of the August 7th meeting says, yes, we're going to re-up, we're going to have another budget meeting at the second meeting in August, that's already laid the groundwork. Council decides they need to have additional meetings, we can call special meetings, we can have off-week meetings, whatever, right? Those are all things that can be done. Otherwise, September 3rd and December 3rd are the two big dates. Like I said, September 3rd, it's just set the preliminary levy, you cannot go above that. December 3rd is when you're actually setting a final levy. We do it at the first meeting in December, simply so that if there is anything that happens, you still have time in that month to come back around. But in the end, it's got to be certified to the state by, I think it's 3 days after. It's like it's a weird thing. It's like 3 days after the Thursday after Christmas or whatever before the end of the year. So based on. To arrive at this, this levy, right, we have multiple components. Working our way up from the bottom there, debt service levy, 203, 385, right? That's just math. We have a debt service schedule. These are debt payments that go out. These are monies we have to collect. These are prior commitments that already happened and have long since sailed. Abatement levy, that is really just part of the general fund levy, but Department of Revenue needs me to report that separately. That's part of the hotel project. EDA levy, that one we are setting based on statute. Statute says that you can't be above a certain % of the estimated market value as you go through this process. So we just calculate that amount out. We levy for the EDA simply because it looks good for rating agencies. Someday when we issue bonds, or we issue bonds we weren't intending to issue, we want to have already spent a bunch of years putting ourselves in a good position. Rating agencies like that, they'd like to see that you are investing in economic development. That's one way to show them, even though I transfer the extra back into the general fund anyway, that's fine, we can play the game. Street construction levy, same deal, right? We know the full scope of work, we know we want to be debt-free on that. We've gone out, last year we went out to 2057, and this is the levy right now that we need. Based on what I know today, this is what we need to levy today. Capital maintenance levy, right? This is a Fund 920, same kind of deal, right? We've got a full scope of work. I present 20 years. I'm looking out 40 years. And right now, as things sit, that's the number that I think we need to be at. And it's going to have to be pretty close. After that, the big number is the general fund levy. And that number, right down to the $897, is just how we would have a balanced general fund budget. No contribution to reserves, but no draw on reserves. Oh, the graph, I should at least mention the graph, right? I never spend a ton of time talking about levies. Levies are going to go up with inflation over time. If you just stare at graphs of levies, it's always going to look terrible. It doesn't matter how that works. I mean, and of course, this is the one I always care more about. Tax rate. This is actually the number that actually gets used to calculate someone's taxes. We've done a remarkable job lowering the tax rate since 2018. Like that, we'll get into comparables and stuff, and we've put this up right at the end of my December meeting. I always put up our competitive analysis, right? where do we stack up, right? We got to actually grade ourselves. If we're going to talk about lower tax rates, it's like, oh, that's nice to talk about, but you actually have to do it. How do we compare against other cities? And we'll get into that. But yeah, preview, we kind of crushing the competition on that one. 2024, we're just a smidge under her, 45% right now. As things sit, we're going to be just a smidge under 46. That's a net 2.6 change, but just to understand, average tax rate over the prior 15 years, so 2010 to 2024, average over that span, 64 or 65%. So this levy, this tax rate of 46, we'll just round it, 46% is about 30% below the 15-year average. So that's real dollars. And this is a graph that I care a little bit more about than, well, a lot more about than levy. This is how you compare between cities. This is how you compare between moments in time, right? I can actually understand something from this graph by comparing 2011 to 2021, right? I actually have information. Comparing a levy from 2011 to 2021 is not particularly helpful. For anybody, any residents that would ever ask, the simple formula, and it's a little more complex than this, but if you break it down, tax rate, total levy divided by market value, right? And as long as you've got any two of those numbers, you can work that equation out and arrive at the other. So this is just the summary of the general fund. Obviously, in your packets, we got the full detailed, painstaking detail on all that. Nothing super wild out of all this relative to where we've been in the past. We don't have, any new full-time staff or, anything like that. So, we haven't drastically changed anything. We're not moving to a new building or something like that. Like we had a couple years ago, things got a little wonky trying to project how things were going to go for PD. Or in Fund 609 for the liquor store when they changed locations. So we don't have anything like that makes things particularly challenging. So we put this up every year just to give some sense of how things are progressing. Yellow is 2019. This is just for departments within the general fund that are over $100,000. It doesn't necessarily mean they're over $100,000 every year, but they have been. So we can kind of see where the priorities are, right? That's kind of the old adage, show me your budget and I'll show you what's important to you. So just good information. Kind of a rehash of the prior, except this has got a little more detail. This includes even the departments in the general fund that are under 100,000. Again, this is, show me your budget. I'll show you your priorities. So, of course, police is a big chunk of that. Public safety is a big deal. And feel free if we have questions along the way. Otherwise, I'm going to try to keep going so I know we can get back to at least some of the cow items that are important tonight. EDA, only thing to really mention here is this is almost perfectly static, and the levy amount that we calculate is just a math formula based on estimated market value per state statute. This one is going to be, this is what I've got right now. How about that? It's based on the work that I've done on the rate study, which we haven't even gone through yet, but it's going to be subject to change. The big thing to recognize with, especially the water and sewer fund, but it could be any enterprise fund, is any one year, you could have a very negative amount, a negative cash balance, cash flow, I should say, in any given year. For an enterprise fund, that's how that works. That is not unusual, and that in and of itself is not something that is particularly scary. It is worth noting, though, that in our list of debt payments here, 2028, we do have some significant debt coming off of the water fund, and that does play into the rate study, and I'll talk about that a little more later on. Sewer, same deal, except here the big debt that's really going to drop off that is consequential is 2029. It's a little bit later, But same kind of deal, right? Some years you're going to have a ton of cash coming in and very low expenses, and then next year it might be completely the opposite. So always be cognizant of that, but that's what long-term planning is for. Stormwater, super status quo, right? We've been cutting rates. We're through all the big projects. Now it's about just maintaining the work that we've done, the infrastructure that we have, and make sure we stay on top of things, and we shouldn't have any issues with that. Municipal Liquor Fund, again, they don't have any big problems. They don't have any big expenditures coming up. They've just got a new store. This is more about maintaining the stuff that we have. We might put in a new beer cave door or something like that. I don't, one that's a little better insulated, doesn't have the condensation. But we're not talking about giant amounts of money here. But even when conservatively estimating forward revenues based on historical data, Liquor Fund continues to do fine. This also includes a $420,000 transfer out. For a lot of years, we had been at $350. Then we had upped it. We tweaked it again last year, and I've just kind of said, all right, let's cut it off at a round number of $420,000, which was a number we've used in the past. So, debt service funds. This is fun because we're fine. Oh, go ahead.
On that, so last year, what did we move out of the liquor store fund? Was it 450 or was it that 420?
I have it on another sheet. We can get into that in a second, but I want to say it was 524.
Was it that much that we did last year?
Just
Because we had a lot of
just off
cash sitting in
just
there
off
last,
the top
yeah.
of my head, I think
yeah.
it was more like that, yeah.
Oh.
This is a fun one, right? Debt service fund. Going levy debt free for me is kind of a big deal. I view enterprise fund debt as being a different deal. That's sort of that debt's paid by the user, right? It's a little different. I have a choice on how much water I use. I have a choice on whether or not I go to the liquor store. Those kinds of things. But levy debt, no choice, right? So let's maybe not do that so much. So what we have here is 2014 B bonds have dropped off, right, for 2025. We're down to one debt issue that is levy debt dependent, and that will be paid off in, final payment will be in 2030. So that's super fun. And we get to that point, we may very well find ourselves being the largest city in the state that is levy debt free. Questions on that? Questions on that? All right, so this is, I recognize this is a lot of numbers. And I realize that this is my thing and not necessarily everybody else's. I do get that. So if this is entirely overwhelming and anybody wants to have a conversation separately on the side after this or during office hours, just let me know. I have no problems getting anybody all the time they care to have. This is that historical data, right? So we'll keep it simple, right? If I look at, on the left-hand column, 2010, estimated market value back then, we're at 357 million. We're now climbing to 859, right? Market value increases over time are a really big deal. It is functionally, that growth, that development is functionally how you're gonna end up with an ever-declining tax rate if that is so desired. There's some kind of calculations there in between, right? I've got change from prior based on taxable market value, overall class rate. I never know that ahead of time. I always have to just suspect what it might be. That's one of those deals. It's kind of like the actual final taxable market value. I'm not going to know that ahead of time. I can get us real darn close working with the county and get us pretty close, but never definitively know that ahead of time. Then below that in the bold, we start with general fund levy. We can see some historical data there. This spreadsheet didn't exist before me, so I've simply populated the historical data as best I can based on the variety of spreadsheets I could find, but condense and get it all into one spot. But yeah, we get, back in 2010, 55% certified tax rate, climbed to 86 in 2017, and we're now back down to about 45. And I think it was George, I think you had asked the other day. Yeah, that is, as best I can tell, that's the lowest rate we've had. I'm sure there's probably a time back when Isani was a few hundred people or prior to that. You know, I mean, maybe there's a historical, but I don't know when it would be that we have had a lower tax rate. So that's pretty cool too. That doesn't, you don't always get to be a council member during that time. You don't always get to be a finance director during that time. So that's cool. Yeah, and then we've got some other fun data in there, right? Levy per capita and things like that. I think this is stuff that I've distributed before. If you need it again, let me know. If it's a PDF, Excel, whatever it does, or you can, or come in and talk to me. So, touch on this super quick. Right now, we are looking at population roughly maybe 7,800 next year, right, with growth. We're adding a lot of homes. You got to figure out about 2.6, 2.8 people per new home. Plus, we're adding some apartments, right? I always think this is absolutely awesome, is if I'm up here at 2025 and I'm thinking maybe 7,800 roughly, just back in 2000, just 2,300. That is a really significant amount of growth in you know, basically 25 years. That's a lot. That really is. So that's just fun stuff. At least for me, maybe.
What's always kind of cool is, I mean, you look at that, the early 2000s, there you go, 23, and then by the time you're at, 2005, you're at 5,000, you know, I mean, it almost doubled in like 5 years. That's crazy.
Yeah, in the lead up to the Great Recession, boy, there were a lot of homes built, and there were a lot of people moving around, and there was a tough correction there, and the tax rate reflected it, but things have clearly steadied out. Tax rates dropped back downward. Yeah. So.
In 2011, the population dropped, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, actually, here, this is another fun one I added in. Water gallons per year. You can see there was a time in the early 2000s, especially around that recession, where we were really plowing through the water. For that population to be plowing through this much, and we pulled that way back down. And this is what we're going to end up talking about a lot going forward here, is where we start going from, you know, 145 up into the 230s, and now we're going to be, I don't have it fully populated, but we end up at 267 million gallons. That is the nexus of our problem for rate studies. And then let's real quickly go through. This, again, is not a super fun sheet to look at for everybody, but I sure recognize it. Let's see if I can do this all at the same time here. So if we send out a version of this now, you know, at least quarterly, right? Actually, no, we've gone to monthly now. And it's a version of this, right? So you're going to get a little more familiar with this. It's going to start to be more comfortable. The first few times you look at this, it's, even when I got here, just getting familiar with the chart of accounts takes some time. Those account numbers don't necessarily mean diddly for a long time. So keep looking at it, keep thinking about it. It will get there. When you do get this version of a book, remember that these red tabs, they do actually have fun stuff in there. Every now and then I forget about one that's in there for, you know, for a past year or something, but generally these are all valid and have some kind of information that that you would be, you might find interesting anyway. Starts out taxes, right? This is just my levy. This is my licensing permitting category, right? No giant changes on any of this stuff. I'm assuming that building revenues are going to go down, but at the same time, it's an offset, right? We're contracted out, and I'm basically giving 80% of the revenues away to Rum River. So if the revenue drops, my expense drops. So this is kind of the beauty of having that contracted setup. Revenues go up, expenses go up, revenues went up. So it works out fine. So we don't sweat that too much. The only thing we don't want to do is inflate this beyond a reasonable number just to make the budget work. That's the only thing you don't want to do, right? Because if you say, oh, well, I'll just change 70 grand, let's make that 270. Now, look at the budget, it looks awesome, but we actually only come in at 70. That is going to be a problem. There is still that 20% margin between the two that will come back. Intergovernmental revenues, right now, the best estimate I've got from the state is LGA going up just a little bit. Big proponent of LGA. I think that is a great way to level the playing field among cities. Charges for services, not any big changes here at all. Actually, we even went down just a smidge on that for revenues. Same with fines and forfeitures, very similar. Then we got some kind of miscellaneous categories. Transfer in, 465, this is the sum of two transfers, the primary there being liquor. Liquor's putting most of that 465 in. The rest is coming out of the excess in EDA. Then we got council, right? This is your guys' stuff. Any of this that you guys want to change, I set training and instruction at $900, mostly because in years that I've set it for higher, it's generally gone unused. But if we have council members who are like, no, I'm going to this, I'm going to that, cool, let me know.
We thought about iPads. Is that in the budget and when that's up for replacement on those?
It was recently, and the consensus was they're fine,
Yeah,
but we can re-up that. That's in Fund 614, that's something we'll talk about in capital for next week, but yeah.
okay.
We just need to, actually, we're doing a full redo on all of that. The 614 is, computing devices, essentially, right? It's kind of the technology. During COVID, we had a lot of grant monies there that bought some additional laptops and things like that. And so we're working through, like, which of those devices are just going to be a do not resuscitate, and which of those devices have proved valuable and functional and should get replaced. Also going through when I'm doing that inventory is figuring out, do they need to be laptops? Some devices yes, some devices no. Generally, if you buy a laptop versus a desktop, you have spent an extra $1,000 for that particular form factor. If it's getting used, cool. If it's not, I'd rather not spend that. And elections for next year, in theory, we'll have nothing. Here, we've got admin intern currently in here for part-time. Otherwise, all of these items that you see subcategoried here, I'll click on it, right? It's just, you can click on these and just see how this is working. All of these items, like miscellaneous office supplies, copier lease, all of these things actually reside over here. And I have everything listed. All of the percentage, all of the allocations, all of the vendors, all of the amounts adjusted for inflation, on and on and on and on and on and on it goes, right? And all of those numbers come back around and end up populating these cells in this column throughout the document. Okay, so this isn't, these numbers are not, it's not a buckshot thing, right? Like, this is, paying close attention. Here, outside of wages, attorney ends up generally being the big thing inside of admin. That's kind of the number 2 expense. And that's a tough one because you can budget 40 grand and maybe only spend 7, and then you can budget 40 the next year and you might spend 80. It's just how that, it's very, very difficult to know that ahead of time. So we've got, what is that, about 36,000, 38,000 increase in that one. Special projects is an old one. I keep it on here still because I do have some history, but once that history drops off, I'll stop presenting that. That was a one-time deal. I don't anticipate us using that in the future. Planning and zoning, no real giant changes here. In the end, we're up about $14,000. Some of that is zoning code updates. We do have a large format printer scanner in here currently. We have a lot of plan sets that are hard copy, sitting in file cabinets, sitting in boxes, and to be honest, back in 2018, we bought a large format printer, and I wish it had been a large format printer and scanner, but it is what it is. So if we want to get that out of here, get that digital and be compliant with the things that we need to retain, that would be a helpful tool to have. Municipal building, this one is, when you do the simple math, this one actually goes down. It just is what it is. But we also don't allocate any wages there. Police administration, this one we don't have super big increases. Most of our, maybe all of them, are at the top of the scale. So that's actually good, I think. We don't have a lot of turnover like we did 5 years ago. Steve remembers this being on the council, and it was like, man, I mean, we had one or two officers coming and going every year, and that is frustrating. That is difficult to retain institutional knowledge, and of course, then that makes the chief's job a whole lot harder. We do allocate out the OT. Once upon a time, we didn't, but I think it makes sense for council to have an understanding that rather than just a random $40,000 number, like, well, why? Like, what is the thing, right? How did we get there? Same as all the other stuff in this column, right? It's meant to provide that detail and that understanding that this wasn't a buckshot approach. This is calculated. Like, when I go through and I'm putting up that other sheet where we've got the levies and all those things, the intent there of breaking down all that stuff into individual levies is to be able to have any resident say, this levy is BS, and for any of us to be able to go, no, this is correct, I can prove it. Let's go through these one by one. I can prove that this is the correct number, and this is the correct number, and this is the correct number, and this is the correct number, right? And I think, well, I suppose most cities don't take that approach, but they probably should. Yeah, we'll go through these. For me, yeah, we got the Explorer program, Citizens Academy. Travis was able to remind me that I needed to put that in. Almost forgot about that. That wasn't something I had grown accustomed to. Otherwise, a lot of this is very similar. Budget for last year, the same, nearly the same. We should be very happy with our prosecuting attorney. Since he got work in Cambridge, he's given us a discount. He's like, I'm already in the area. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. What else do we got that is of interest?
Are you saying there's an honest lawyer out there?
Yeah, right? I mean, I either write it down, maybe buy lottery tickets. I don't know. Then we got some stuff in here. Oh, I should change the formatting on that cell. This is kind of the big one in technology is the RMS maintenance and support. And it's just one of those things. It's like between all the technology that officers use and all that they should use and all the stuff that they are required to use, it just is expensive. It just is. And it is what it is, I guess. Yeah, we go through the basic stuff. Fuel and washes, right now, I mean, that's one I'll probably definitely revise toward the end of the year when I have a little better understanding of where we think we are with the economy. Yeah, we got Lexipol in there, gotta have that. Special response team, this is one where that's a high-end guess, but it's gonna depend on who we're working with and what the other agencies wanna do. You know, if they've all got $1,000 budgeted and that's it, we won't be putting in 55. So, but we'll try to make sure that we're prepared. This is another one, taking out utilities because of course they're taking over, right? And public safety for fire, run calls are down so much. I'm hoping that there might be room for a modest decrease here. If it doesn't work out that way, you know, we're probably not, you know, we'll be able to fix that, I would suspect. But right now, that's what I'm hopeful for. Let's see, building inspection. Yeah, this is one of those calculated deals. So this cell, actually, if you look up at the top, this is just referencing those revenues up at the top of the page, and with their formula calculations of, you know, what is 90%, what's 75%, all those different things. Same with the electrical inspector. He's 80%. So we take that revenue and then pass it, most of it, back out the door. You know, to the extent that building services is using audit services and technology and things, they cover their share on that. Even if we don't have a dedicated building official in-house, that's still a service that's provided. There's still overhead costs regardless. Of course, code enforcement got rolled into police. Animal control is, well, most years we budget stuff, we generally don't use it, but you always got to plan on a few problem dogs every year. General city maintenance, not a lot of changes here either. You know, we're up a few grand, but good chunk of that is just insurance, or not insurance, inflationary. This one item, we do have some money in here to correct the wiring. The air exchanger on this side of the building of City Hall has never been correct, apparently, from day one. So Myron has given us a ballpark on getting that corrected, and that should help with the stuffiness, but also the air temperature in here. Actually make use of the full HVAC system in City Hall. Streets, roads. This a lot, again, a lot of the same kind of stuff. Salt and sand, taking a guess on that. You never quite know ahead of time, but Matt makes his calls. This is another one I always put in township road repairs. I've asked them more than once. I would love for you guys to give me a forward plan and tell me which years you plan to do it. I will have matching money waiting for you so that we can hold up our end of the bargain. They don't want to do that, so I just budget pretty regularly, and we just don't spend it if we're not called to. Always have sidewalk repair in there. That's a never-ending battle. Repair and maintenance of equipment. Yeah, even if we have a great capital maintenance replacement plan, some of that is going to go up over time just based on inflation. Street lighting, very static. We're just going to pay utilities on that in this fund. Sanitation. This is essentially the compost pile, right? Parks Rec Culture, we got an intern, we've got our custodian. We did break this out this year a little bit, so we can see what portion of this number was seasonals versus the custodian over at the ICC versus intern. In the past, that hadn't been lined out, so we do have that lined out this year, so that's a little clearer.
Administration, was that, you said that was the compost site?
Yeah, and the things that we
what's the
would
number on that?
allocate to that. Yep. So we got some wages, some part-time wages, right? So our seasonals, some portion of their stuff will go to parks for mowing, some of it will go to sanitation for actually manning the gate and all those kinds of things. We always have a contingency on OT just in case. Same with closing replacement. To the extent that any of our public works, they have all of their stuff allocated, spread out, to reflect the duties that they actually do. And so if I replace clothing or something that is ruined, then that clothing is then allocated, but the same as their pay. So that's how you end up with a good
What's-
chunk of this stuff.
The one question I had, what was the ground maintenance one? Is that just $9,000?
This one,
Yeah.
compost screening and brush. That's right. So that's to actually screen the
Oh,
compost. We
okay.
get quotes. Matt and I get quotes every year from Bjorklund and all the others in the area that can do that. And then brush. It's
Okay.
basically a contingency to be able to get rid of that. Be able to whether you're hauling that away or having that hauled away, whatever the situation is. Yeah, we got portable restrooms. We've got allocations for our office supplies and those kinds of things. We've got some money for ICC tables and some archery targets. I put in 7 round hay bales. I don't know if that's the most popular answer, but we can certainly put out whatever targets council wants on that, but that's definitely me dragging my feet on that one. We got signs, right? We got extra 1,000 in there for 2 park signs above the 750 we would have put normally. Then we've got our technology and communications, that kind of stuff, insurance, utilities, standard tree planting, LIMAG. This was brought up during the process, is for $5,000, that's just touch up. That, just to be clear, that's not, 5,000 is nowhere near enough to redo those trails out there. That's to get you through. And every few years, we do need to go through and do more of a wholesale, $20,000, $30,000 type job. Repairs, maintenance of equipment, council-directed items, mowers and repairs, right? So we didn't replace the mowers, so we're just automatically budgeting. They've got to be able to run. We've got to have money to fix them if we need to. And if we don't need to, then we won't spend it. But this reflects that new platform, right? We got rid of the Sportsman stuff. This one will work better, and it's cheaper, so that's a win-win. We split that with Illuminate because that was the original primary function on that, and one of the key uses. Let's see, we get street dance, right? Go ahead.
Could stop you there, because on the Illuminate, if it's a free event now, do we need to have software for selling tickets?
Just if I can speak on that, I know council had discussed
You know
accepting
what I'm saying?
digital donations, and so
Okay.
that's how we would be able to do that. Is
Okay.
through a QR code on site and accept digital donations that way.
Okay, all right.
And how much was that one?
It's $2,400 a year
2,400.
total for
Yeah. so-
combined.
It doesn't change the, it's just classifying it.
Yes.
That's all I was
Yeah,
really
so then we
asking.
just,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
and I'm just
doesn't
splitting
change the
it,
dollar amount
I'm
either
just
way.
splitting the expense between two spots, so.
For that, we couldn't just do like Venmo or Cash App or something?
Those fees are often higher. We did use Eventbrite the year prior, but the fees are just ridiculous. So this way, if we use the platform that we're using for other city registration things, then we get a better rate. So more of the money comes back to us.
They
I
got
guess
money,
I didn't know Venmo even took fees.
it depends where the money started.
Yeah.
If you transfer money in from a bank account, you're cool. If you have tied a card to it, you will be surprised to find out that your credit card assumes that as a cash advance.
Hmm.
If we tried to go Venmo, no matter how much advertising we did, somebody would make that mistake and find out that they were charged 15% or $35 or whatever their card agreement would be. Somebody's not going to be thrilled about that one.
Okay, I guess I
Uh,
use
my-
it a lot and I've never had any
my
charges,
wife-
but,
My wife made me aware of that
okay.
in the wrong kind of way, so. She was very surprised. I said, well, that's how that works. But anyway, the only other one is the second year now. We got repaying on 438. 438 is a construction fund that was from parking lot improvements, has been sitting there in the hole, 75 grand forever. And at some point, we do have to be able to show, especially a future ratings call, that there was a management plan, council directed, to get that whole. They don't really care what the plan is, just that it is a plan and it is something that can be executed. This simply continue to execute 10% a year, and we'll get that thing whole and not have it be a dramatic drain on any one budget. This is a transfer back to the liquor fund for 2018 improvements. These were improvements, street improvements like, was it Penny Lane, Richard Avenue, related to the hotel project. Liquor fronted cash, they are due that cash back. This is a plan that covered it over 10 years, so we'll be, a few more years we'll be through that. Then in the general fund here, this ends up, we get to the end here, we end up with a balanced budget. No contribution to fund balance and no pull from fund balance. Economic development, very similar, like really similar. Not a lot of changes. And in the end, remember, because we levy on that based on a calculation by statute, there is money left over. So I send it back to the general fund, keep my rating agencies happy, make sure that they understand that we're committed to economic development. I'll tweak this number as we go based on final actual, so that this balances out to zero, but it's not the be-all, end-all either way. Water fund, this was kind of populated at kind of the last minute here because I had, working on these rate studies in addition to all this stuff. This is where it sits currently. We haven't made a decision on rate studies, and we don't need to tonight. But I definitely need council members, when we get to rate studies, to really think about this. And over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, before the end of the year, we need to make sure we are really clear about the situation we're in with water and what needs to happen. So in this one, again, not huge changes. The big thing in water, and we'll touch on this again later when we get to rate studies, the big one is, where's my number? Oh, I didn't go down far enough. The big one is capital expenditures, unfortunately. And for that fund, that's going to drop our cash by nearly $2 million for 2025. And we'll talk more about that and how that could or could not be avoided and what assumptions I have made to get to that point. Sewer, not a lot to talk about in sewer. Sewer is still doing its thing. In the end, the object with the rate study for sewer and any operating budget, any capital budget for them is we want to keep stacking cash. We know we have a wastewater treatment plant coming up in roughly 2040. We've talked about the philosophy of intentionally issuing debt on that because I don't want 20 years of residents covering the entire $23 million cost, only to have some of them not even be here to use the finished product after the fact, right? We want to spread that out, make that more equitable, even if it does mean issuing debt. Unfortunately, I genuinely believe that is the lesser of two evils on that one. So very standard, very similar to prior years. Again, all your calculations, all the allocations that are lined up here. We don't have big capital expenditures in sewer for next year. If I remember right, this is just a portion of a computing device. So, or probably a couple of different computing devices. And so we'll stack up roughly another 600,000 cash in 2025, roughly. Stormwater, again, we're basically trying to maintain a reasonable cash balance to make sure we're covering all our maintenance and that we have got we've got something extra for legislative risk. Josie and I have talked about this before I don't know what it is, but I do not like my chances of getting by for another 10 years without an additional unfunded mandate on that. I don't know what it will be, but I am not optimistic about getting by like that, but we'll see. We do have MS4 stormwater permit application. This is a deal we do with the state. When we get to that point, we have Bolton and Mink carries a lot of the weight on that. We don't have dedicated staff for just this. So when you do need services, you contract it out. That's how you keep costs down in the long run. Same with the MS4 assistance. It's slightly different, but on the engineering portion for MS4 assistance, we use it if we need it, and if we're not, then we just don't use it. So there we have a much more modest contribution to fund balance there, not quite 90,000. We'll see how that goes. Liquor, on this one, we can see this. Basically, I am trying to be as conservative as I can be on this, and I'm actually taking and rounding off from prior actual, right? So I'm not rounding off. We're taking 9.5%, and the idea there is that I've got to account for the year that's not complete yet, right? So it's not 9.5 in 1 year. That's a split over 2 years. I think based on history, I think that's pretty reasonable. I think that's pretty close. And if we're not dead on, remember that if sales don't hit it, that means I also have some expenses, cost of goods sold, that also didn't rise to that level. So we're sitting pretty good. We get through all these things. A lot of it's the same. Capital expenditures, if I remember right, the bulk of this one is for a new beer cave door, one that's better insulated and will not have the condensation issues that the current one has. 420,000 operating out. That's their debt service. That'll continue for a number of years. And even after that transfer, right now, projecting cash flow plus of about $100,000. Again, we'll see how this all pans out. We've got lots of different insurance numbers to come in, and we'll see how things go over the next few months. 931, this is going to be our last bond issue. This is the one we refunded in 2021 to save ourselves some money. And this is the bond issue that now just has history. It's no longer a thing. So one more off the checklist. That's the basics of what I got for you. Questions, comments, concerns? And this is an introductory meeting, right? This is the first round. So take it home, look at it, think about it, come ask me questions, email me questions, call with questions, all those kinds of things. And then I'll just keep you guys updated as we go. As things change, we'll just keep doing summaries, and we'll keep updating these books, and we'll keep trucking ahead.
That's great. I'm really optimistic.
Biggest concern is that water. That's what was that, 1.9 million deficit?
No, wait till we get to that.
Yeah, I know.
As bad as you think it is, it's worse.
Nah, I believe it.
So for this is good. The only thing I would also remind you is, yes, we want a declining tax rate over time, but that no matter what you do, honest to God, no matter what you do, the tax rate cannot go down every year. I'm not saying this is the year it's going up. It cannot go down every year. Eventually, you will have to continue to have something like that go down every single year. It either needs to be very small, very steady, or you have to decide what service you are currently providing that you are no longer going to provide. And it's not on a 1 year, it's we're done.
Right.
Right?
Well, I know the discussion last year was to get in that high 30s, we'd be more competitive, and that was our goal. So if we have to do it in small amounts each year to get to there,
Yeah, and,
because we're so close.
well, and so this is, and you and I talked about this, actually, probably right after you got on the council, we talked about this. And, you know, with the kind of the plan in my mind that I had laid out was those small, single-digit, down, 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 and the goal was somewhere around 2030, worst-case scenario, 2034. We are in that, we're in that range, right? We're in the same ballpark as Elk River. I mean, maybe you can't quite catch up with Otsego. They have such a dream mix of, anyway, but, you know, you can get more competitive with those, you know, the Coon Rapids, the Elk Rivers, those larger cities that, you know, they can have a low tax rate even if they aren't really fiscally responsible. When you
For now.
have that much,
For now, as people move out, they're,
but as, you know, but when you have that kind of commercial and industrial tax base, and those, and that tax classification rate makes a huge difference, and when you've got the right mix, good golly, I mean, you can have a low tax rate even if you're terribly irresponsible, but that's not gonna be the boat we're in. So, we'll get there, and it'll be a far cry from the 86 we had just a few years ago, but that'll be good. It's good for development, it's good for the people that have been here and the people that stick around.
When you were doing the water rate figures, can you take last year and just pretend it never happened and redo your charts and take a look at it? Because it was an outlier year.
We'll go over that, I have all that.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause
Yep.
we still got a committee of the whole coming up after this too,
Yep.
so, and that's one of the topics on there, and.
Yep.
So let's,
Yep.
let's save that, maybe digging into that a little deeper here, and we'll do that in a minute, but.
Yeah, so unless there's questions, concerns, I don't need to say anymore.
Any other questions for Mike, guys? No, I think it's, appreciate you getting all this work done, and I know it's, it's a lot, so. And that goes, you know, you're telling us to come, you know, talk with you, ask questions, and that goes for members of the public as well, though, too, so I mean, any.
Yes, that's
you-
good
yeah.
clarification, and I should also point out too, is this isn't just me that works really hard on this. I demand quite a bit from the department heads, and I
Yeah,
can
that's
tell
true,
that sometimes they are not real thrilled with what I've told them they have to do and the timeline within which they need to do it. And so I do appreciate them dropping what they're doing otherwise and stepping up and taking care of that stuff. So it's not, I don't want to act like I'm the sole reason on this stuff, but
got a lot of nice formula writing in those spreadsheets. You got some practice.
uh, you only know the half of it. Like it, yeah.
All right,
You should see my tax settlement workbook. All right.
all right, well, I'll take a motion to adjourn then, unless anybody's got anything else.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Merrill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned, and we'll jump into Committee of the Whole here in just a moment.